direct market is hand selling. Direct market is hand to hand combat with a sharp weapon where you are trying to make up for whatever investment you gave to me as a publisher, right? You're trying to claw that all back. You want to make that money. So you're going to fight for that.
Right now, comics are sold everywhere. Comic shops, bookstores, Amazon, Kickstarter. I even saw some at the airport, just in the middle of the books. Each one of these channels is growing, competing, and sometimes colliding. The big question is, what does the future of those comic sales really look like? If you are a publisher, a retailer, a creator, or just a fan who cares about how comics reach readers, this conversation is for you. Josh Hayes has spent decades shaping the way comics and graphic novels get sold. From Walden Books to nearly 20 years at Diamond Book Distributors, he's now the VP of Consumer and Sales Marketing at Boom Studios, and he's seen every side of this business. In this episode, we talk about how sales split between the direct market, bookstores, Amazon, crowdfunding, and digital, and what that means for our future. The stakes couldn't be higher. If the sales landscape keeps shifting, it changes the way that shops survive, and how publishers grow, and how readers discover their next favorite book. So, let's get into it. Here, without further ado, is my conversation with Josh Hayes on Will Amazon Take Over Comics? And what's coming next?
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. I think, this is, well, like we were just talking about, there's so many things that go into this world that nobody knows about, where like you think it's simple and it's just this and it's that, and then later on it's you kind of feel like as a parent, like when you're talking to your kid and you're like, oh, if only you understood exactly how taxes work. It's like
yeah, exactly. You end up like David from Schitt's Creek, where he's like, it's just a write-off. It's a write-off. It's
right.
I feel like that's the way fans often think about this. Why don't they just put it into newsstands? When I was a kid, it was in newsstands. This should be easy. Just put it back in the newsstands.
Just do it. It's easy.
Just do it.
Yeah. So many times I've had those.
You know what? Let's stay with that. I usually like to jump in with like a goofy story, and I have one ready to go in the chamber. But let's deal with this right now.
Yeah.
Let's say you're at a party. Okay.
Sure.
You're at a cocktail party with your your wife, and there are people there that you cannot piss off, and you actually have to give somebody a straight answer. And he says, oh, comics. I what really they should do is put them back into the convenience stores and newsstands. Why don't they do that? Give me a serious answer. Why don't they do that?
A serious answer at a cocktail party. I mean, usually by this point, I would have Irish goodbye right out of that cocktail party. So that's first thing. I think the world has changed dramatically, and in the last 50 years from the way that we were consumers as children. And I was thinking about this the other day that, when I started buying comics when I was 10 or 12 years old, there was one store in town. Everything was pretty straightforward. They had them on the spinner rack at a couple places, but now everything is so different and the world is so flat that those things just can't support it. It's sort of the same reason I think that you don't see comics in a Barnes and Noble, for example. You don't see them other places, is that we've gotten a lot more nicheified, where you want to go to a comic shop and you want to buy the comics you want to buy, and you want to have a pull list, you want to have a relationship with this person. And the best retailers do that. The best retailers kind of create this community space where people can be, where, like I think about when I go through airports, like Hudson News. I mean, I can't even imagine a world where they've got a stripe of comics on the rack of people just randomly deciding, hey, let me pick this up. And, that's also the downside to the entire thing right now of how do you get kids into comics, because that stuff doesn't exist. I mean, my first comic, because I still have it, was like an X-Men annual, like number 17, some nonsense like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything. And I went in blind as a kid and I read it. And that doesn't really exist anymore. You know what I
Right.
mean? Discoverability is such a weird thing. And so why do I think they aren't there? I think that the business doesn't really make sense. And I think the consumer behavior doesn't really make sense anymore. And it's a hard thing to keep up with. And that's, that's another thing that I think factors in for a lot of these conversations with retailers or with individuals or whatever is where do you start? I think I was lucky. I'm super old, like super old. I'm like 312 years old now. Um,
Shut
but
up.
you didn't have to dig through as much history as you do now because lines were pretty straight.
Yeah.
And there was one Batman book. There weren't 34 different Batman books on the stand in a given week. There was one lane that you went down. I mean, variant covers didn't even exist. Like the first variant cover I remember was the Spider-Man wedding one. And it was, that
Yeah.
was it. And it was like the first thing I'd ever been like, oh man, there's two different ones. But it's so different. Where would you even start? And that's, I think, one of the things that we face as an industry too as a challenge is where do you start?
Yeah.
And I think about it, my daughter's a freshman in college this year, which is fantastic, which means I can use her bedroom for my comics room, TBD. Um, but she asked me years ago when the Marvel Civil War book came out, she was like, hey, I'm super excited to see this movie. What comics should I read to prepare for it? And
Yeah.
my eyes glazed over because I was like, well, it's Black Panther this, and then you have to go to Punisher War Journal over here for these two issues, and then you bounce over to this, you do all this stuff, and it's like it's the craziest thing to get a straight line story, which, I grew up on Marvel and DC, love Marvel and DC content. But
Right.
as an adult, I gravitated immediately to indie comics, largely because the sandbox was a closed system,
Yeah.
right? Like you were getting with creators that they had 5 issues worth of story they wanted to tell, and that's all they wanted to tell. And I think that that's, a big chunk of why it's hard to put books back into a newsstand situation. Is where do you start? What do you put there? How do you build that assortment? What does that consumer even look like?
And every store, every neighborhood ends up different. I was at where was I recently? I want to say it was the train station here at in New York. Um, the new really fancy train station. The name I can't remember. They had a little bookstore inside of there, and it was all kind of modern lit stuff. Uh, and I noticed there were a couple of graphic novels that weren't. I mean, they weren't. There was no hey kids comics. It was
Right.
just genderqueer inside of the rest of all of these novels. And I thought, what an interesting time we have now, where I mean, we can integrate into real world literature, but
Yeah.
it's not like we're going to hand you this and suddenly you're going to fall down the rabbit hole of loving comics, right? It's just
No,
going to be
no.
part of your media diet, as it were.
Yeah. And I think we've created a generation that's open to it more,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to graphic novels as a presentation. Single issues are still a weird thing, right? Like it's
yeah,
it's that Wednesday warrior business, that, chasing after things. Like that's less of a consumer of the medium in some ways than a graphic novel. And I love the Wednesday Warriors. I still love reading single issue comics. I love flipping through them. But there's also something as I've gotten older, I'm like, let me read it when it's all done. Like let,
yeah,
let me see where this goes so that I'm doing this way. And
yeah,
I think we've, in a weird way, we've created a whole new generation of readers and consumers who grew up on Netflix, grew up with the binge mentality, and that's the hard part. Like that's the effort that we need to do is to figure out a way to communicate to those readers, hey, here's a story you can jump into now. It's going to take you 6 months to finish it because that's how long it's going to take for the comics to come out. Let's do it. It's a harder sell to the younger kids. I mean, I again sound like I'm super old, but like that's a harder conversation to have when it's like you gotta play this game and you gotta play it 20 different ways to get to the end instead of here's your copy of Fourth Wing. Go ahead, read it, knock yourself out.
Let's go back to my goofy question to launch this thing off, just to get us into a good headspace. I want you to begin the this conversation of the details of how to build a career inside of like the sales, the marketing of comics, or something. I think a lesson that you and I both really learned early on. Can you talk about why people should avoid a place called High Tops? That because honestly, this might have been one of my first lessons in trying to sell to the book market. It's just avoid this particular bar. You know what I'm saying? It's
well, that's honestly where I developed my Irish goodbye skills. Was going to, a million sales meetings at the Diamond headquarters in,
uh-huh.
they say Hunt Valley now, but lovely Timonium, Maryland,
Oh yeah, 100%.
which, it's lovely.
It's lovely.
And not a lot of options that were close to the office. And so
Nope.
you wound up at this sports bar, which was a very much a middle America sports bar. There was, you weren't doing anything fancy.
Nope.
It was straight up stuff. And that's where you worked to try to figure out the relationships you had with publishers or the relationships you had with reps. Because at that time, it still is to a degree, very much a hand-to-hand combat thing.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? If you and I didn't connect as people, you were worried that the books you were presenting to me weren't going to get sold into Borders, Walden Books, Amazon, wherever it was. So you had to play the game. And that schmoozing thing, it's changed. Honestly, like post-pandemic, I think especially. But that was the game. Could you stay out until 2 a.m. and drink with everybody, do all that stuff, finish it up? And I hit a point like really early on where I was like, you know what? Nothing. And it's funny because Philip Savlik and I were talking about this not long ago. Nothing good happens after midnight. Nothing.
No.
So the faster you figure that out as a professional in the comic space, the better your life is going to be. It's crazy.
That is true. I will say that there is someone we know. I'm going to put it that way. Just put it that very simply. Someone we know who I saw walk across. It was an outdoor bars area, and I walk across that bar, literally puking as they walked. Finished, wiped up, walked up to the table, and said, "All right, so shots."
I'm 99% sure I know exactly who you're talking about. And I will tell you that that person is responsible for the only times I've nearly missed international flights. The only times I've nearly been arrested internationally, and the only times I've witnessed a street fight. So that's like you knew going in with that person, you knew. Yes. Worst case scenario, you were going to get a utterly insane story out of it.
Yes.
And that was the the MacGuffin of the whole evening was like, what is the story going to be? But yeah, that tracks 100% tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. We both definitely know who we're talking about. Well, all right. So talk about that relationship issue, because you're right. Part of the reason why I was in that space, part of the reason you were, I was trying to get to know the sales team, and I wanted the products I was selling to be top of mind when they're out there selling. And I wanted to get to a place where, you're in that sales conference day, which for anybody who hasn't gone through it, essentially people like Josh sit around a conference table, and people like me come in and we show them a deck and we do a song and dance and we talk about why this is the most exciting thing they're going to be selling for the next 6 months. And they listen, and each one of us is absolutely certain that our stuff should be sold. And they go, and then just eyes. When I knew if I was at the end of the day, that your eyes were just going to be glazed, and there was it was a challenge just to get you awake enough to ask a question. But the reason you go out to the dinner after and then the drinks after that is to have that moment of clarity, right? That moment where our guard finally falls down, and I say, look, Some of these things maybe not, but this one is special. I want you to pay
Yeah.
attention to it. And you have a chance to say, and I will tell you, at one of those particular bars, one of your team said to me, I hear what you're saying, but it's all I can do to sell Walking Dead right now. That's all my whole day right now is selling Walking Dead. I don't have time for you. And knowing that
Yeah.
it was on me to do it because you weren't going to be able to, that was a huge piece for me. And we never would have gotten there except we did the dinner and the drinks. That's my
Right.
little.
No, I think like that's one of the things, and we still talk about it at Boom every day,
Mm-hmm.
is how can you position this book to sell it when you have to embrace the elevator pitch.
Yeah.
What about what I'm trying to get you to fall in love with can I state and convince you in the time it takes to ride from floor 8 to the lobby and we all leave?
Yeah.
Like that is it's terrifying and people hate hearing it, but it's honestly been part of publishing since the way back, right?
Gutenberg. I
When
don't know. I mean, how do you
well,
seriously?
I mean, I remember when I was a buyer at Walden Books, I went to like a book expo thing and I hopped on a plane and some little old lady sat next to me and you know, she was like, "What do you do?" And I made the mistake of telling her I was a book buyer, and she proceeded to tell me all about her grandmother's book of recipes and why we should publish it or why we should do it. But it also made me think about like you've got to have it so tight.
Yeah.
Like you have to know going in. Like the worst thing you can do when you're talking to a publisher about your project, or the worst thing you can do when you're talking to a consumer about your project, is not have figured that out.
Yeah.
Right? Like you need to be able to tell me this is what it is and this is why it matters and it needs to be almost that fast. And that's, when I think back to those old days, like people would say, "Well, it's got to be great. You just sit around all day reading books." Or, on the publishing side, "Oh, great. You just sit around all day reading comics." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No. So much of it is decided in 30 seconds."
Yeah.
Or a minute. And when you would come and sell to us at the meeting, you had half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it was, and you're going through and you're hitting 20 books, you're spending 5 minutes on each one. At the end of the day, those sales reps, whether they're PRH sales reps, Lunar sales reps, whoever it is, they're looking for the nugget. What is the 30-second version of what Adam is telling me that I can repurpose? Because the reality is, when you sit with a buyer for a Barnes and Noble, a Books a Million, somebody like that, that's how much time you've got. They're going to give you a 15-minute meeting or a 30-minute meeting, and you got to go through 50 books,
Mm-hmm.
30 books, whatever it is. And that's the hardest thing. And that's one of the things that we talk to creators about, we talk to editors about, is like it's got to be super tight. If you tell me it's going to take me 15 pages to understand where this book is going or how this book is going to get there, you got a tough sell. It's a tough thing to do. I'm all for world building. I'm all for doing all of those things. I think they're super integral to the story process, but you better have a hook. You better have something that people can sink their teeth into in those first 22 pages of story, first 18 pages of story, whatever it is in a comic, or they're not coming back for number 2. And they're sure not coming back for 3, 4, and 5.
Oh yeah. I will
And
say that even beyond that, like this, beginning to create content for video for YouTube and that sort of thing. I've been studying this, and there's one crew that talks about how your first 5 seconds are about paying off the decision to watch this video, right?
yeah,
Those first 5 seconds have to be, okay, I've made the right decision. The next 5 seconds have to be resolving that they know that they're going to get something. And within the first like 15 seconds, you also have to set the hook for something they didn't even realize they were going into. To my mind, this like from a storytelling aspect, that's the first 2 pages, right?
yeah,
The first 2
yeah.
pages have to be, thank you for picking this up. I'm not going to waste your time. Here is what you're going to get. And here is why you keep reading. Yeah.
It's
100%.
I mean, and prior to me being in publishing, like I was a creative writing kid in college.
Yeah.
And I honestly have a theory, and I'm curious if you share it, but I think everybody that works in comics professionally is in one way, shape, or another a failed comics creator or a failed creative. I don't mean failed in a bad way, but I mean like
Sure.
they didn't latch on to something that they were able to sink their teeth into because
Yeah.
it always feels to me like we're all in this because we love comics ultimately, or we love story. And
Yeah.
you got to set the hook. You got to set the hook so early.
I would say that I almost agree with that. In that, for me, I've written a couple of scripts, and I've had I've done some, probably there's at least 50 pages of at least two or three novels. It's somewhere deep in an archive somewhere. And in both instances, what I found was I enjoy this. I don't enjoy it enough to suck long enough to get good.
Right.
Right. And at that point, for me, I think I built a career partially because I didn't want that. I never wanted to be the writer. I never wanted to be the creative. I wanted to be able to, have a reasonable conversation about creative, and have a conversation about what it is this book should do in order to sell. But those things don't, I mean, that I don't think you necessarily have to be failed. It's just oh, I tried that, I'm interested in it, it didn't quite work out. And also, going back to something you were saying about pitching, one of my biggest pieces of advice for really just getting started, like self publishers, when they say, how do I distribute, how do I get going, I usually say, you don't want to distribute yet, you're not ready
Right.
yet, right? What you need to do is go to a convention, or 10 or 20, because you have to give the pitch of this book literally 10,000 times. Like, you really need to just have it so down that if someone asks, if you're in an elevator by floor 8, you can give it, and they will, there's no doubt in their mind they need to buy it. Like, you need to watch people, how they respond. You need to know which pitch works, which pitch doesn't. You got to tinker with it, and that's only comes from reps.
Your pitch is your only weapon when you start out.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can have the coolest thing, you can have the greatest, but if you can't sell it in 30 seconds, it's so hard. And I totally agree. I think those conversations, sitting at an artist alley table, doing something at a local con, and just figuring out what words you say that seem to turn somebody's eye lights on, right? Where it's like, oh, um, but I think like that's always been the key is
Mm-hmm.
you have to embrace it. And so when I talk to creatives that work with us or work with other publishers I'm just friends with, that they've done it over the years. They've
Yeah.
figured it out. You know what I mean? They've found a way to make sure that no matter how complex their story ultimately is, and they can be infinitely complex, they have found the thread that they can say that is immediately what it is,
Yeah.
and I think it's the hook for your story, but it's also being able to tell somebody what it's like. Because as humans, I think we gravitate to that. What is this book like? Well, it's like this movie meets that movie. And it's a tremendous tool to set that environment,
Sure.
but you also need to focus on why your book, your project, your thing requires that attention, needs that time, like that you're going to try to get from that person. So I can tell you it's like Mad Max meets Star Wars, and that sounds cool and all, but then I better follow it up with the 30 seconds about my project that makes you really wonder what that is. You know what I mean? You visualized it, but now like what does that really mean? What does that look like?
And you really have to communicate to this audience, this person you're pitching, this buyer, this reader, this whatever customer. You have to communicate to them why this is as important as those two things.
Yeah.
Right? Mad Max meets Star Wars, why this is as important as those, so that so your time invested in reading it is going to inform you when you're talking about, it's going to, next time you're talking to somebody, you can say it's The Future Is meets,
Yep.
I'm trying to find something completely random, but I'm up on it. So
The Wizard of Oz. Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz. Thank you. It's The Future Is meets Wizard of Oz. Thank you. Oh my gosh. See, I completely failed my own pitch. So let's talk about early Josh. You mentioned
Sure.
that you were a buyer at Barnes and Noble or Walden Books, right? Was that pre or post Borders acquisition? How did that work?
So it was Borders had already bought Walden Books. I came up the way that almost everybody does. I got a part-time job at a Walden Books in the mall in my hometown during the summer. I was home from college
Hmm.
and really liked it, and ended up. I think what it was is I liked dealing with people and seeing them latch onto story and feel passionate about story. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
anybody's worked retail's had a billion bad experiences, but it was always those phenomenal experiences where you're like, oh man, I recommended that book and that guy came back and raved. So clearly there was something, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I was working part time and they had a Walden Books in the town that my college was located in. So I was like, oh, cool. I'll work at that store while I'm going to school too. And I went over there and worked, and Borders was located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where I went to school. And they had a rotation program for new hires where they would send home office employees to the stores to learn what it was. Like, how does this work? Right. Which I thought was super smart and an
Hmm.
incredible, valuable thing. And a woman came and did her stint at my store and we just really connected. And she was like, I think you'd be great at the corporate office. Let me see if something pops up. So I started as a department assistant while I was a senior in college, slowed down my coursework because I'm like, this is a real job. I get health insurance. I get like all this stuff. Um, Started doing that and then just played the game corporately for a while and realized that, I loved story, loved creativity. I was also pretty darn good at data, which was such a weird thing for me because I had
Yeah.
never thought of that, right? Like I was like, oh, I want to be a creative writer. I want to do this. I'm going to write books. I'm going to do all this fun stuff. And then I got into it and I was like, oh man, there's so much to be gleaned from what's going on in the world and how this is functioning. And, you sort of sharpen those tool sets. And yeah, I mean, I bought sports for a bit. I bought role playing games, which was probably like the closest I got to like being part of my nerddom of like, oh man,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And then from there, I had gone to Gen Con with Kuyu Lang and met him there. He didn't go with him; he was there, and we
Okay.
had we had dinner and just kind of created a relationship. When he was starting the Diamond Book Distributors thing, he called me one day at work, and I had had like one of those days where you're like, I could quit tomorrow and wouldn't feel bad about it at all. It was just like one of those weird timing things. He
Yeah.
called me at work and he's like, hey, I'm starting up this whole big thing. Who do you know that would be good at this? And I said to him, I will call you at 6 o'clock. And left work, went home, called him and said, it me. Like I will do this. I will leave today. You know what I mean? Like it was,
Yeah.
I was ready to go. And I had already done some business with Diamond because at that time, uh, part of the role playing game category was Yu-Gi-Oh, which was super hot. And
Yeah.
we wanted to buy it from anybody that had it. Diamond had some. So I'm calling Diamond and I was, buying stuff from Roger Fletcher and like the the old school Diamond of it all. And so
Sure.
yeah, when Koo called, I was like, oh, yeah, I'll do whatever you want to do. Just tell me, I'll be there tomorrow. Yeah.
That is fantastic. And once again, you went to Gen Con, you met Ku. As is many, Ku, for me, there are a lot of threads in my life that happen because of Ku, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
think he,
yeah.
he does that really well. He's a connective tissue for a lot of people.
No, I mean, he and I we still talk a lot. We have dinner, or lunch, or breakfast whenever we're at the same place. Like
Yeah.
we have a really deep relationship. But one of the things I always found funny when I worked for him is we had a very interesting work relationship where he would be the guy flying at 35,000 feet, going all around the world making deals.
Yeah.
And I was the guy flying the plane to make sure that everything that we were agreeing to was working, right? So we
Yeah.
had this very symbiotic relationship, which we trusted each other. I think we valued each other at a high level, so we were able to kind of do that. But one of the things I noticed, and it was kind of funny to me, was that like he seemed to know everyone. Like it was crazy. And so you would go to a show and you'd meet somebody you had never met before, and the next morning I'd tell him like, oh hey, I ran into so and so. Oh yeah, I know that guy. And it became my goal to meet people that he didn't know.
Yeah.
It was immensely unsuccessful
It's incredibly difficult. It is
until
incredibly
finally
difficult.
I made somebody up, like totally fictionally created this whole person and saw him, and I was like, oh man, I was hanging out with, Dave Swogelberger, whatever. He's working on this thing. It's so cool. He's like, oh yeah, I know that guy. And I was like, aha.
Aha!
I was like, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. Yeah, that's, but no, he's a huge connective tissue then.
He
I
truly
mean,
is. Yeah.
millions of us know each other either through him, by him, have both worked with him. You don't even usually have to say his last name,
No, he's
which
just
is,
cool.
yeah,
He's
it's
just
just cool. It's super easy. So yeah, but no, I mean, I owe him a ton of stuff for my career, and value him tremendously as a friend.
100%. And same. To this day, there's still I when I look at my board, the people that he brought me, or the people that I bring to him for one reason or another.
Yeah.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's daily, but there are times it's weekly and easily monthly, as long as I've been doing this. So let's talk about, so you move from buying for Walden Books into that. You were essentially, I have a member of my team that I have a couple times referred to as my hands. I'm like, I'm gonna find this thing that we can do. I know we can do it. I'm gonna need you to do it. That's the way it is. So I think of
Yeah.
her as my hands. But so you were Koo's hands during this period, I guess. Sales manager, you working. What I have is working accounts like Amazon, Borders, the other big chains, right?
Yep. Yep.
Is that so? You walked into that role? Is that how that worked?
Yeah. I mean, I went from being a Walden Books buyer to selling to Walden Books in like 24 hours. And, so it was good. Like you had the relationships. I knew the people. I knew the personalities. I knew kind of what was in play. And, then obviously as Borders and Walden Books grew, you had a lot of things happen. I mean, that's where Kurt Hassler kind of came out of, was, he was a long time Walden Books buyer, kind of one of the founding fathers of manga being in bookstores. And, he saw it and really identified with it. But I was selling to him, selling to the other buyers at Walden Books Borders, depending on how they applied to it. And then eventually slid over to managing the Amazon business, which was a totally different ball of wax. I mean,
Yeah.
I love data, but they just eat and breathe data. And it's such a crazy thing. It was so weird to me because for so long, every relationship I'd had with somebody, an account, whoever it was a human relationship, right? I had a person, I knew what they liked to eat. We would go out to dinner, and this was like, you go to Amazon, and it's like, this dude doesn't like comics, doesn't even read comics, probably has never seen a comic book, and that's your guy. But you better convince him the data works. And it just changed. It changed the way I had to approach a few things of what matters in the industry and how to play that game.
Well, then when I met you, I think that's the role that you had. You were primarily our Amazon contact, and you
Yeah.
talked us through some of the things that needed to be done. And there was this really, especially during that period, because the direct market was so integral to sales of what we do, like you didn't want to piss them off, but you also want Amazon.
Yeah.
The only way to move Amazon was to be the marketer for Amazon, right? It
Right.
was the only way
Right.
to
Right.
get the attention of the algorithm, as it were.
Yeah. I think, thinking about the way that it worked back then, I think we were a little misguided, to be honest. I think as an industry, we were worried too much about bookstores. I, I
Mm.
I firmly believe there's a Venn diagram, and I firmly believe that there's a portion of consumers that probably would have bought it at a comic shop but bought it at a bookstore, and vice versa, right? But I don't know that it did any damage. Like that's the thing. I think from a lasting standpoint, I think as we grew the marketplace in bookstores, online, we did all of those things. I think it ultimately fed comic shops too. And I think that's because the thing is if you buy the first volume of Something is Killing the Children, you dig it, you read it, you can go to the second volume because it's already available, but you also might decide, hey, I was looking in the back and I saw these cool covers. I want to see what the single issues look like. And that's kind of where you play these games. And I talk to a lot of shops. There's a lot of shops out there that are really smart about the way they market and sell product of, here's the collection for the first volume. Put it on sale or do whatever you can to have it as close to the kickoff to the second arc. so that you can take people that didn't read the single issues, hand them the collection, and hand them the first issue of the second one. And then you've kind of built into both spaces, right? You've got a trade reader, you've got a single issue reader. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest chunk of what we try to do is feed into each other. And boom, we do both, so it's always kind of interesting because I feel like you wear the two hats of like what serves the direct market, what makes sense for the direct market, and how you want to take care of the direct market,
Yeah.
and what works for bookstores, what works online, and like it's not exactly the same sport, which I think is hard for people to wrap their heads around at first, but it's such a different thing. And the consumer, like I said, there's a Venn diagram, but it's not as overlapped as people think.
Let's talk about that. What do you think success for like a company like yours that you are now, Boom is now at PRH. You have access to a lot of different resources that you probably did not have
Yeah.
as just Boom on your own. You being a data guy, I'm sure have access to a lot more data and are able to see that. So I would love to spend some time just kind of in at 35,000 feet, right? Let's take a look at what is it that actually grows the pie. So we're talking, I mean, and assuming that that Venn diagram is what grows the circles of that Venn diagram, I guess is really more the question. A pie is a bad metaphor if what you're saying is accurate, because we're not competing for portions of market share. We're competing for how do we increase the size of the market. What do you see actually increases that size?
When it comes to single issues, I think there's a few things. Like I think it goes back to how you position it and partner as a publisher with retailers, right?
Right?
At at Boom, we strive to be as retailer friendly as humanly possible. I mean, returnability. We're going to throw everything at it because the thing is I'm ultimately as a publisher, I'm asking every single retailer to take a stand, take a risk, and do it with money, right? It's not like, hey, loan me your copy of what. No, I'm asking you to spend money on something. So
Yeah.
I need to make it as flexible and fundamentally sound as possible for that partner, right? And like that's how we view that market is it's entirely a partnership. Like I know levers that we can pull that can help grow things. I know the levers that will change people's minds on things, but it's also got to have a trust factor to it that they know that we have their back and we're not going to come to them 15 times. You know what I mean? Like if we when we look at our slate of books or we're looking at everything, like we ID the ones that we think have high potential, so we're going to feed into those. We know the
Right.
ones we got to work a little harder at because it's going to take a little bit more work. But at the same time, you're basically just trying to give the direct market an easy way in. You know what I mean? I'm going to give you a number one. Here's a simple pitch. I'm going to give you the pitch pre-honed. The tool is already sharp. You can take this 30-second thing and you can flip it around to your pull list customers. You can flip it around to the people that walk inside the door. You can make it easy. I'm going to give you as many assets as I possibly can before the book goes on. So like we're going to do as much work for you. We're going to market the book. Like that's the other thing, on the Boom side of things, like we really strive to get as much social media going, as much stuff ahead of that FOC window as possible, because that's the key piece. And like that's where it's a little bit of a weird marketing beast when you're launching something is you've got the pre-FOC boost where you want to try to get the numbers into the shops as high as possible. Then you've got the post-FOC pre-on sale window where now I'm trying to get people to show up to all those stores that we convinced to take a financial risk with us
Yeah.
that I'm going to deliver consumers to buy this product at their store, right? So that's the way that we try to leverage things and grow things in that space. When we're talking about on the book market side, it's about making it easy. It really is. I mean, like I think as an industry, it's really easy to have super long running series and everybody wants a super long running series. But at the end of the day, you also want something that's like the one thing, right? And so I think about when we were doing Walking Dead with Image, it was a really great experience to see how that worked because, Robert did the single issues, he did the 9.99 trades, and kind of was the first light that was like, wait a second, I can do this 15 different ways, and there's a consumer for each one of those versions. And they're
Yeah.
not they're not mutually exclusive necessarily, right? So we would sell a new volume of Walking Dead to all of the 9.99 trade buyers, and then 2 years later, we'd sell them the compendium of the exact same material in a $70 version. And it's just it's sort of realizing that this consumer behavior can exist in so many different streams that you leverage that. And that's I think one of the big keys to how you grow your book market business. You have to make it easy for whatever that person wants. That person wants to spend $10, you have a $10 version. If that person really digs it and wants the $75 deluxe, you've got that sitting right there on the shelf too, if they want to spend their money that way. If they want, the phone book, compact comics, whatever, whatever you want to think about the Tonkamon style collections, they're there too. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
have to be able to kind of play that game because the consumers now, everybody in the bookstores shopping in our section is familiar with manga, is familiar with different things. They have all these price points and mentalities that kind of come into play. So you want to try to feed them as much as you possibly can in that space. And then the other thing that you do if you want to grow readership, and this is, maybe a little controversial to think about it this way, but this is how I think about it, is crowdfunding and kickstarting.
Yep.
When we do a crowdfunding campaign, it's usually one of two different things. One, it's a property that we feel like has a market outside of the areas we already handle, right? I already have relationships with 2,000 comic shops. I already have relationships with bookstores. But there are a lot of people that watched The Expanse that probably had no idea we made comic books.
Yeah.
And
100%.
that's exactly what you try to do in that space. The other thing you can do is you can do really nice collections of things for the fans and for the collectors. That's the other piece of crowdfunding. But it's a great way if you're looking to grow something of hitting people that are maybe just they're just not the traditional consumer. They're not somebody who's walking into bookstores to see what's new on shelves. They're not somebody going in on Wednesday to read what's going on. It's not necessarily taking money out of either of those other pies. Now,
Yeah.
there certainly is some bleed over. I fully acknowledge that like there's money that we do through crowdfunding that maybe would have wound up in a bookstore's coffers or maybe would have wound up in a comic shop's coffers. But
Sure.
it's less about that than it is about trying to find more eyeballs and readers for something that you don't think has necessarily had full penetration on.
Because we work so much with smaller brands that are trying to find their way. I always tell them you need some sort of direct to consumer, and crowdfunding is a really
Yep.
great platform for that because there's already an audience there, right? You're introducing yourself to an audience that is already in place. And I don't see. I always find it really difficult to believe that the 200 to 300 people that can make a crowdfund work really well are the only size of that market, right? It only really
Right.
takes 300 people to make a successful crowdfunding campaign for most publishers. Like it would take thousands of people to get that, and it's usually reflected in the larger markets. Is that if you get those 200 to 300 people here, there are thousands out there that are ready for this product if you introduce it to them in the right time and place. That said, I hear those retailers and I don't disagree with them. I understand that there's, you've got one guy who is a fan of this creator, and this creator did the crowdfund, and so he's already got it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the hard part. And that one of the ways that we try to combat that is we typically don't offer anything crowdfunding or DTC you can get anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's entirely the angle. I mean, we're going to give you the Expanse collections. We're going to give you the Expanse hardcovers. It's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same packaging. It's not going to be the same anything. It's because we want everybody to be able to come to the table and eat, right? And
Yeah.
that's, even on our own web store, we rarely sell something that's available generally, right? It's usually stuff that we've done exclusives for the web store, or we've done same thing for shows. Like we don't take anything to San Diego Comic-Con that isn't exclusive to our booth there, because
Fascinating. Really?
I do not want to compete with direct market retailers at the biggest show of the year.
Yeah.
And sell something and undercut them or have them feel like I'm taking food out of their mouth. So every single thing that I bring is exclusive to that show, because then I'm all I'm doing is maybe giving somebody a taste of something, and ultimately they're going to go back to a retailer and want to buy other stuff. That's
Yeah.
the whole thing. I'm there to build, to market. Like my entire San Diego presence is marketing. It is finding a way to communicate and attract readers and convince them to do things, because that's 4 or 5 days of the year.
Yeah.
I need them to show up the other 360, and
Yeah.
they're going to go to a comic shop. They're going to go to a bookstore. They're going to do those things the other 360 days. So my job at Comic-Con is to get them as excited as humanly possible for 5 days, and then unleash them onto the direct market in the hopes that that's what happens, right? I mean, like that's
I
the
love that.
piece.
I love that. So let's talk about, you are now let's see if I can pull up your actual title, right? Let's see. Where are we? Vice President Consumer and Sales Marketing. Did I have that right?
Yep.
Okay. So essentially everything that is sold to anybody, either sold to a consumer or somebody who is selling to a consumer.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much it? Right.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Can you talk about, I mean, while we are talking about Venn diagrams and not pies, you do have a finite amount of sales that go out of your department. Can you talk, and I don't want you to give away anything that's proprietary, but if you feel comfortable, can you talk about what the size of each of those portions of that pie looks like for what comes through you, right? So for
Sure.
instance, how much of your sales go through the direct market? Can you talk about that percentage wise?
Yeah, I mean, all told, it's probably close to 40%.
Okay. Book market.
It's probably another 40 to 45.
Out of that percentage, how much of that goes to Amazon?
It's a huge chunk. I mean, honestly, like that's I think the thing that's changed the most over the last 10 to 15 years is it's probably 50 to 70 depending on the product, right? And
I talked to a publisher yesterday. He told me 60. Like
yeah,
this is
like straight down the middle would be 60. The thing that we see is that it's harder and harder to get a bookstore to play the game, where Amazon's purely algorithm. So
yeah.
if they get the pre-orders, they're going to order the book, and that's the key. So like we feed as much as possible to Amazon, in the sense of like that's how you find success in the book market, which is a really wild thing now, because it used to be the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges in that 45 to 50% or whatever the book market is there's not that hand selling like there used to be. And so
You don't have to get drunk at high tops anymore.
you do not need to get drunk at high tops. But I mean, there's an inherent problem there too, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever like woken up at 9 o'clock in the morning, you throw on your laptop, you fire up Amazon, and you're like, what should I buy today? No, you know what you want to buy.
Yeah.
You're already looking for it. You've taken browsability, discoverability, and completely off the table, right? It's purely now I want to read the new James Tynion book, so I'm going to go find that. Is there a chance I click on something else on that page and I go, sure, but it's not super high.
Yeah.
That's where it's tough, because there's no way to create this discoverability, and that's where the two symbiotic sides of book market, direct market really play in. Direct market is hand selling. Direct market is hand to hand combat with a sharp weapon, where you are trying to make up for whatever investment you gave to me as a publisher, right? You're trying to claw that all back. You want to make that money. So you're going to fight for that. The book market is a lot more passive when it comes to Amazon specifically. And that's kind of how the two play together.
And the book market, I mean, the direct market is still relationships. It's all ground game.
Absolutely. Yep.
I have a relationship with my sales guy. My sales guy has a relationship with all of those many retailers, as many as possible. And each
Yep.
one of those retailers has a relationship with their customers. It's just relationship to relationship to relationship.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
each one of us is like trading in the trust of, this is important. This is a thing that will sell. right?
Yep.
It's fascinating. Okay, so that's I want to dig into. I want to before we go down, before we lower the elevation, let's stay at the top. 80, we're like 85%, I think, is where like kind of where we're at so far in the market share. So let's talk about that, the extra 15%. How much of that would you say is crowdfunding?
It's probably 10 of the 15.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other five would be D2C. So it's the trade shows, it's going to cons, it's having our web store. You know what I mean? It's not a huge chunk. But it's the other piece.
No digital sales in that. Is that just not your department?
If we're factoring in digital, it's still my department. Because we consider that part of the print side. So it's really, I mean, that's maybe your other five, if you want to think of it that way, 5 to 10.
And what platforms are you on right now? You can.
So we're pretty much everywhere. We went live with the PRH digital team earlier this week as
Okay.
part of our transition. We're Kindle, Kobo,
Gotcha.
Nook, whatever, wherever you can do it. We're working to develop some of the more comic focused ones like global comics, stuff like that. So there's definitely a lot of irons in the fire to try to get some of those things back up and running now.
Why do you think digital hasn't worked so far? Like, why is it only 5 to 10% for you? I would say that there's probably, if I was to ask a musician, I would say that the majority of their, maybe not sales, not revenue, but definitely the majority of their distribution would come through digital. And we can talk about,
Yeah.
where all those, I mean, you and I could probably spend another hour, dissecting why comics is different in that regard. But what has stopped that from happening?
For the vast majority of the population, music is a passive consumption. You're not creating the music, you're not doing anything, you're listening, right? It's purely a consumer situation. But reading, whether you read coloring books when you're a kid or picture books, it's a tactile experience. There's something about holding the book and consuming it that way. There's a smell. I mean, even if you get into sort of the weird sides of things, but like
Yeah,
I love the way a book smells. I love going to a bookstore or a comic shop and picking up stuff and feeling what it feels like. I mean, I look at it with a different lens as a publisher than I probably should. I mean, there's a weird, like, when you know how the sausage is made, do
sure.
you want to eat the sausage? Um, where it's like, oh, I wonder what finishing this was, or where they printed this, or how they achieved this.
Yeah,
But at its core, reading is about a physical connection to a media, right? Like it's the same reason I think that people buy records. Honestly, I think those two are really closely together. Records, it's a personal thing because a record, when you're listening to music digitally, you're consuming media digitally, like whether it's Netflix or Spotify or whatever, like it's a sampling situation. You're bouncing around, you're not doing things. You put a record on, you're listening to those 12 tracks front to back.
true.
You're not putting one track on and then bouncing over to a totally different record. It's the same thing with a book. I mean, you're invested for 350 pages of a novel. You're invested for those 24 pages of that comic. You're dedicating your time, but ultimately it's a tacticality thing. Like I think there's so much about that feel, that smell, that thing. And then, obviously I think as comics as an industry, like we play heavily into the collector sphere and the collector mentality. That's the other piece, right? I like you see it in music, but I think that's one of the main differences in the two kind of entertainment fields of like publishing versus music is there's collectability on the music side, but it's not as developed as it is
Right.
on the comic book side. You know what I mean? Like I collect vinyl too. I think because at my core, I am a collector of things. I might spend a couple $100 on a record I'm really trying to find that's super hard to get. I don't know that I've ever spent 8 grand, right, and bought a slabbed comic or you know what I mean, like
Yeah,
that's.
yeah.
But there's so much of our industry now that I think it is in that space, right? Like we talk about it a little bit when we do exclusives, right? When we do stuff for shows or we do whatever, most of those books never get opened.
Yeah.
It's not a red comic. Like that's a different thing. Like that's the main difference on the collectability side is you're doing it for something else. You're scratching a different itch. It is not exactly the same.
That is very true. When is Boom's first blind bag coming out?
We've done them at shows.
Okay.
We've done them at shows. Uh, yeah, I mean like that. I think if I were to count the number of times Blind Bag has appeared in different work media in the past 3 weeks, it would be six figures, seven figures. The thing is it's funny to me that it took us this long to get here.
Oh, me too. I legitimately was pushing towards blind bags for, because I saw those box breakers. I think this was
Yep.
2022. I was really pushing hard on this for a couple clients, and couldn't make it happen back then. Oh, wish you could.
But I mean, you think about it like I grew up buying baseball cards.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I got to learn the wonderful joys of credit card debt when I was in college because of Magic the Gathering, right? Like all of these things we've already as a culture built. Like
Yeah.
we've already as a society built. Comics, it was so funny because I'm like, how did it really take us this long to really kind of hone this and figure it out? Now it's still a complicated machine. Like that's the part right now that we're talking about internally and trying to figure out is it changes the calendar
Oh,
because you need
sure.
so much more time.
Yeah.
And like that's the piece that, when I talk about the like I wish that retailers understood is a lot of the stuff that we do, man, did it take forever to get there.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pivot suddenly and change something. I would love to do a blind bag tomorrow. Sure. Who wouldn't right now? Because
Yeah.
it's pure gamification of the system. We'll get there.
Oh,
It'll happen. Yeah,
I
it'll
have
happen.
no doubt. Um, so let's go back then. I want to talk about direct market. You mentioned what I found interesting when you were talking about the sales timeline in the direct market. You didn't mention an initial order. In the old days, initial order was like our first tent pole, and
Yeah,
now it's almost useless. Um,
yeah.
I would say it used to be that it was like 80% initial order, 20% FOC. And now it seems that has flipped, if not even more, in the other direction. From what I'm seeing, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know if you see that as well.
I think for us, we leveraged IOC pretty heavily through Diamond because it was a barometer. You know what I mean? It was the canary in a coal mine of being able to look at a book and go, okay, this book is in trouble.
Yeah.
We're well short of what we forecasted. What can we do? And you still had time. Like that, I think is the piece. Like when I think about IOC specifically, rest in peace at this point, but like you had an idea of where a book was headed sometimes as much as a month before the FOC. You could get, 3-4 weeks ahead on the right timeline. So you knew, okay, do we have any other art assets I can throw as an FOC reveal? Do we have anything else I can do? What other levers can I pull? And we ran into this visibility problem just recently when we launched the Marian Heretic book that Teeny Howard is doing with us. We went into FOC weekend feeling good, but also feeling blind.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember over the course of that weekend thinking about it a lot of not having the ability to see that IO number to know, am I throwing so much effort at something that is already in trouble? Or am I throwing effort at something that is absolutely going to lap it up and run with it? Not having visibility to that makes it really hard. It changes the levers you can pull. We were really happy with the way that book launched. Super happy. Cannot be happier. The hard part is like you still find yourself Tuesday morning quarterbacking going, oh man, if I knew the IOC was sitting, we could have maybe still ABC, DEF, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so losing that, I mean, that is honestly one of the hardest parts. I think when you think about what's gone on in the distribution space in the past 5 years, losing sales charts, like effective and accurate sales charts. And I know there's a lot of efforts out there that people are trying to put stuff together, and I applaud it.
we're working on something.
You know what I mean? Having
Yeah.
something where you had a better idea of, you know, keeping up with the Joneses of like, okay, well, what is, and we talk about it all the time. I mean, the number of conversations I have internally with other people on the leadership team about what other publishers are doing or how they're doing it, because we don't have visibility, right? There's no way. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if, you know, if publisher X is happy with the way a book launched because I don't have a way of judging it and ballparking it. Because that's the
Yeah.
other piece. The sales charts let you ballpark things. You're like, okay, well, I know that my book that came in at number 8 sold this,
Yeah.
which means, you sort of like extrapolating some things. So losing that visibility on the charts is definitely painful. And I'm fingers crossed. I've talked to the PRH Comics folks extensively about this in the past year that we've been part of, under Penguin Daddy, as we like to say. Um, they need something. They need that
I know.
IOC. I need a visibility window, and I'm hopeful they develop it, and I'm hopeful that they keep working on it because I've talked to them a bunch about it. Of like, just it makes our lives as publishers, as marketers, as salespeople, infinitely easier to be able to look at something 3 weeks out and know what you need to do,
Yeah.
and kind of play the game that way.
Yeah, I get that. And I will say Prana is working on something. It's been on the back burner for a while, and it's continuing to bubble, but we haven't quite been able to figure out a way to bring it forward in a meaningful way yet. Like we still
Right.
do stuff for our newsletter, and you can get a piece of that, but yeah, it's a difficult thing. Like, how do you replace that? I personally think that pre-orders are how we're going to, and I know that I use that as a gauge for our clients of, this is where pre-orders are at compared to others. This is what I think we're going to get to. Or, you know as you said, there was a publisher not too long ago that came to me and said, I don't even know what to do here. And I said, well, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I guess my guess is this where you're going to land? But that's with a really small data set. And God bless them, they did much better than anybody thought, or that we thought. So, and I think it's a lot of is that moment of, oh shit, well, what else do we have in
Yeah.
here? Right? Let's get it all out there.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is they don't make themselves, as we both
Yeah.
know. You know what I mean? So like sometimes I'm going into FOC and I'm like, I've literally eaten every part of this buffalo. There is nothing left for us to do. And I found myself like at one point with a book a little while ago of like, what assets do we have from number 2? Like I need more. Like I need more stuff. Um, but no, I think that what we do now and what we have to do is I try to keep up relationships with retailers and talk to
Yeah.
them. And my team talks to them, but there are a few that I talk to personally, and I call them up or message them on whatever social media application we have connected on to be like, how's this book working for you? Is it looking good? Like just to try to get an idea of like what are we doing that's resonating? What are we doing that's not resonating?
Yeah.
And every store is different, so you have to take all of the feedback with an immense grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of useful data, and that's my email is always open. My phone is always open. I'm always available for a retailer to talk my ear off about whatever because it's valuable. It's immensely, immensely valuable. Whether or not they thought we were listening or not, I trust me. We sat there and we heard a nugget in there and thought that's something we can do or that's something we could do differently. Um, but it's just there's less of that flow without that data, like without having an IO to be able to go, okay, this book is doing X. How
Yeah.
do we get it to X plus 30 or whatever it is? Now it's a lot, I think we maybe identify more with comic book retailers than ever before because it's hand-to-hand combat for us too.
Press of comics has become a real problem, right? We're
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to get the word out. It's just become a real challenge. And so we're all working in 6 different directions where we used to have 1 or 2, and you knew if you leaned all the way in, your relationships there or your money there or whatever was going to play. So talk about how you are, like, what are the resources that you're leaning on hardest in those, let's say, pre-FOC? And what are the resources you're leaning on hardest for sell-through consumer marketing after?
I think for us, I mean, we play the same comics media game I think that everybody plays at this point, where there's a handful of outlets and you try to cultivate them. We work closely with Heidi at the Beat. We've got a relationship there, so we work on that. I always try to make it a holistic relationship with Heidi of like, listen, I'm not asking you to cover every single thing I do. I'm not asking you to do. I'm giving you a menu of what we have coming. You tell me what you like, and you can have it.
Right.
And working with Milton over at ICB2 and doing things like that are kind of industry focused. We work with Rich at Bleeding Cool in the sense of like he's a different outlet. Like it's each one of them is different, and you kind of play the game in different ways with each of them. But traditional like comics media and publicity is scarce now.
Yeah.
So many of those websites have either gone away completely, they've pushed comics back to the seventh tab on the homepage, or they've done whatever, and they're just regurgitating, right? So, we send out our press releases, and I can't even count the number of times I've looked at an article online and laughed because it's exactly a sentence that I saw in the press release draft that our fabulous publicity team did. You know what I mean? Of like, oh man, they just copy and pasted. So it's hard. So like that's the hard part, but you have to do it. Like we leverage the Beat, ICV2, Bleeding Cool to speak to the industry. We love to leverage the Comics Pro team to reach the industry. We've done a handful of webinars. The webinars are fantastic tools. Like it's such a great thing for us to leverage. We don't do it too much because the reality is like nobody wants to hear this, and if we have time, I'll tell you a Paul Levitt story about it. But like, you can't love all your children the same. So when it comes to a Comics Pro webinar, if I've got 3 different number ones FOCing on the same month, you know what I mean? I'm not going to possibly be able to do that, right? So you end up picking your shots and really trying to leverage it that way, because you want retailers that go to those Comics Pro webinars, that watch the recording later, that get engaged with it, to know that this mattered to you. That this was not just me pulling another lever. This is a book I believe in, or this is a book that we as a company have a lot of faith in. So we're going to give you the creative team to talk about it. We're going to do everything we can to try to do it. So we leverage that Comics Pro relationship. We do a lot of direct email. I mean, we play that game. We utilize the PRH email stuff pre-FOC so that they're bumping things out. We roll up our sleeves on social media, and our social media team creates a lot of great content to try to get things going. But it's just about hitting those beats as tightly together as possible so that you have a little bit of rolling thunder going into that FOC weekend.
Yeah.
And like you want an article on Tuesday. You don't want an article on Monday because that's the day everybody's FOCing the week before. You want an article on Tuesday, then you want a really cool social piece on Wednesday, and then you want another email on Thursday. You want to play the game to get you through the weekend, and then you see what happens. You know what I mean? It's weirdly like placing a bet on a sporting event where you're kind of playing the game to see what happens, and then seeing what Tuesday morning looks like to go from there. And then you sort of take a week to figure out, now how do I leverage different things to go for OSD, right? To hit on sale. And you're again scraping the barrel. You're trying to figure out exactly what you have that you can release, like more pages you can show, more art you can show, more covers you can show, like whatever it is you can kind of leverage, because then you're talking to a reader. Like then I'm not hyping FOC, I'm not hyping all that stuff. I'm really trying to build that story in the eyes of the reader so that they see an image, an iconography, whatever it is that they really latch onto, that they want to read. And we keep track of that. I mean, we look at the metrics all the time of, oh man, this post really hit. Like, we either need to A, do more of it, or B, break it down to its DNA and figure out what it was that was different and then make it repeatable, right?
Yeah.
We've started leveraging, the past couple of years, a lot of influencers to do some of the same thing. It's easier because they also have a platform that's slightly different than my platform, right? So if I'm feeding something to Sammy DeMonster and she's hyping stuff up, like, she's attracting readers to a comic on the consumer level, not retailers. And that's one of our angles that we try to play. And then, ultimately when you get to OSD, you do your high five victory lap and you see where everything goes on issue 2. and then you get to play the same game again 6 months later when you want to go put that collection out,
Mm-hmm.
and you're scraping the barrel again. You're trying to find more stuff, because that's the hard part. Like when we first joined PRH, wrapping their heads around our comic life cycle was one of the hardest parts of them understanding, like, we're producing 6 individual SKUs that ultimately become one additional SKU,
Right.
but 6 to 9 months later, but it's all the same content, which really shows sort of the fabric underneath it of what you have to do from a marketing perspective, because it's all the same, right? Like, it's the same book.
Yeah.
And if you covered, if the beat covered the single issues, they're maybe not going to want to cover the trade paperback. And it's, playing that game again of like, oh man, where can we place this that makes sense? Who do we know that we really liked it from? And, you change the playbook ever so slightly, but it's, you're playing the same game. Like, we were lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to get an announcement in Entertainment Weekly, and I'm like, that's fantastic. If only they would rerun it when that trade comes out. It's like, I know they won't. I know they won't. I know in my heart of hearts, there's no way that's going to happen. But what if, right? Because like, that's a totally different.
How do we get social media to actually play into this in 6 months for this 6-month-old story that has been sitting there the whole time? Yeah.
And I used to, when I was on the distribution side, that was a conversation I had with publishers all the time. Like, can you keep a couple of bullets in the magazine for the trade release?
Yeah.
I understand now exactly how hard that is to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like at the time, I was very much, why wouldn't you just hold a couple things back? It's a piece of cake. But now, having done this for a few years on the publishing side, I'm like, oh man, I need everything. Everything for the single issues that I can repurpose is great. But if that single issue doesn't work, it doesn't matter what the trade does.
Exactly. There may not be a trade. We may kill it, right? We may not even finish. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I find that's the thing I find the most interesting about taking each step. And part of the reason why I have this podcast is each step in the rung, you find those things that you were so sure would work when you got here, that you find out exactly why it is nobody does them. Right? And each time, there is no point at which I haven't found that for me, myself. And so it's just about, how do I learn that ahead of time so that when I show up in the room, I'm not saying, why don't they put comics on a newsstand?
And, for me, moving from distribution to publishing, I mean, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There was like 9 months of my first boom, 9 months, where I wanted out so bad, because it was so fast.
Yeah.
Like, on the distribution side, it's so much slower. It's so much more predictable. And on the publishing side, it's so much faster and so much more unpredictable.
Yeah.
And but it was the most healthy thing I could do at the time, because I think I had hit a point where I had done everything on the distribution side I would ever want to do. Yeah. I needed something different. I needed to be energized. And immediately that was the case, right? Like, when I walked in the door, I'm like, oh, now I know why you weren't able to do the 15 things I asked you to do as a distributor. Never occurred to me before why it was difficult, or what was hard about it, or why you couldn't just do this. And then you're day 3 on the publishing side, and you're looking at it going, well, yeah, duh, of course we can't do that.
Of course. And even if we could, like, when are we going to do that?
Right.
Like, that's the lack of bandwidth for handling publishing is just, it's a constant problem. Well, I'll talk about, like, how'd that transition happen for you? Was that something you initiated? Did somebody come to you? Where did that?
I mean, I had hit a point, I think, at Diamond where I'd done everything I wanted to do. And the industry was changing. You know what I mean? It was late 2021. Diamond was in a weird place. I mean, we can 4 hours on Diamond, I'm sure, but the wheels were starting to come off, and I could see it. Maybe because of where I was at in the organization, I maybe had a little bit more visibility than some other folks, but there were starting to get chinks in the armor at that point, because by then, late 2021, DC had left and Marvel had left, or was about to leave, right? So you had all of these things, and you could see it. Like, you knew what the foundation could withstand at Diamond, and you could see that potentially the weight was going to outweigh what that support system could hold up.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of decided I needed to make a change. I knew there were some things that were out there that I was interested in. I had briefly done some consulting for a couple of people on the side while I was like winding down at Diamond because I'm like, what's out there? But I had known Philip for 20 plus years to the point he worked at Diamond when I was there. And so I knew him from that world. We had talked about wanting to work together, do different things. We really liked each other. We were really good friends, really felt like we had a lot of the same views on stuff. And he and I were never able to because they wanted people in LA. And I had
Right.
zero desire to move to LA at the time. Um, so when I left Diamond, he called me the next day and was like, "Hey, what do you think?" And it happened super fast. Like I was able to kind of do it really fast and kind of get it moving. And at that point, they were fully remote, so it was a different ball game. There was still some concern I think I had initially of like, are they going to stay remote? You know what I mean? Because at that
Yeah.
point, when I started in 2022, the pandemic stuff was changing a lot. There were a lot more. My wife works in entertainment law. We were splitting our time, strangely enough, between LA and Florida for her job. So I was out there a lot and able to connect with the team and do stuff. But I was honestly a little worried. I'm like, are they going to hit a point where they pull everybody back?
Yeah. Right.
And then I'm in trouble. But more and more people as the pandemic went started moving. So, when I started at Boom, Hunter Goranson and I were the only two East Coast people.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
And so we would talk in the mornings because there was literally nobody else in the office, nobody else on Google Chat, nobody doing anything. So he and I
Yeah.
could do stuff in the mornings. Um, but then over time, it's become such a different environment. I mean, we have people all over the country. It's not even half in LA, I would guess at this point. And PRH, that was one of the first conversations we had with them during the acquisition. Was like, they're like, no, like our entire team is remote too.
Yeah.
So, that was a big chunk of it. But that was my one of my initial fears was like I'm gonna get, stuck becoming LA Josh, which, I was already, like I said, spending half of a month there. It was more than I needed. So
It's funny that you have that because the in the earliest days, even before he moved over, I had the same relationship with Hunter because we were working on Bad Idea together, and in the earliest days of Bad Idea, he and I were the only East Coast, and eventually Josh Johns joined up with us, and so it was the three of us in the East Coast, and before everybody else would wake up on the West Coast, but you're getting stuff done. It was actually great.
oh man, I mean like before the PRH acquisition and before we had more people, it was the best thing in the world because I knew I could start work at 9 o'clock
Uh-huh.
and I had 2 hours easy where inbox zero. I
Yeah.
had, I could knock stuff out because there were no meetings. There was nothing else going on. Once we hit 11:30, 12 o'clock on the East Coast, my life was shot. I mean, I
Yeah.
was in meetings for 5 straight, 6 straight, 7 straight hours. Because I was one of the only East Coast folks on the leadership team, I was in meetings at 9 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. You had
Yeah.
this I had this kind of weird bi-coastal existence.
Oh yeah. I'm
And
familiar.
as it started shifting, it got a whole lot easier and a whole lot healthier where I was like, oh man, like, okay, now, I've got the East Coast stuff, got people on my team that are East Coast based. We've got the PRH folks, knock that stuff out, and then the West Coast comes online and we knock
Yeah.
that out in the afternoon.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I feel that. And and the same. It's funny. I cannot imagine having to start a business now and putting everybody in the same room. I just, it doesn't track.
I miss aspects of being in office, but not much.
Yeah.
And like that's,
Same.
when I
Yeah.
left Diamond, I was there for 10 years, left for 3 and came back, right? When I was gone for those 3 years, I was in an office and it was miserable.
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay, the thing that I miss is like the ease of collaboration of running past somebody's desk and being like, hey, you have, what's this looking like or whatever. Um, but we've gotten through that, I think, with a lot of different things that we implement on our side of just like trying to get people to establish some community and some
Yeah.
connections. Um, but yeah, I don't see a world where everybody ever goes back. I mean, I know a lot of companies are starting to claw it back, but usually those are the companies where they own the building
Yeah.
and they're paying for the building, so they want everybody in there using the building,
Yes,
right?
right, exactly. Because why else do we own this building? Yeah, I could see that. I just on the small business level,
Yeah,
like it just gives you access to everyone too,
right.
And I think that's I don't know from our my standpoint. I don't even think about geography now at all. I have to
No.
keep being reminded of a couple people that are on our team of where they live because I guess they're not awake yet. Okay, that's fine. I get
It
that
changes the talent pool. I
completely.
mean,
Yeah,
more than anything, I mean, there's so many people that you can have conversations with now about jobs that they don't want to move. I mean, the thing is, I didn't want to move. I had a kid in high school, right? I'm not going to do that to a kid. But at the same time, if you don't have to move, a lot of people show up on that board that you can circle that have incredible skill sets, and you're
yeah.
like, oh, I'll take that guy, I'll take that girl.
What are let's go back to I want to find a couple things here, just pull a couple of threads that I feel like are dangling. You were talking about Paul Levitz. Paul has been a big part of the boom sort of ecosystem for a long time. Talk about why he is for those who don't know who Paul is, give us 30 seconds on that and then talk about his lasting effect.
Yeah, Paul obviously was publisher at DC for a long time. And as a result of that, like he was there when graphic novels really broke into bookstores, when the direct market kind of made some dramatic moves, right? When you think back to like the 90s, early 2000s, some of the expansion, like the birth of Image, like a lot of those things, Paul was involved intimately with the direct market at that time. So he's got a war chest of stories that's incredibly valuable to be able to pull upon.
Mm-hmm.
And, I worked with him tangentially when I was at Diamond. And when I went over to the boom side, he was always there as sort of a guiding voice, hand on the shoulder. If, how would you approach this? Like what, what's, and, the downside is as we all get older, we all want to tell our stories in kind of
Yeah.
grandiose formats, right? So you had to kind of like, how do I get it down to just like, what do I do here? But I mean, Paul, I think is one of the people that is the foundation of where this industry is right now, and
Sure.
really saw a lot of the stuff that was going on. Really saw the potential to expand into bookstores.
Yeah.
Really saw the potential of what the collector market, because it always existed for comics, but how do you monetize it as a publisher? I mean, that was something that came along in the last 20 to 25 years, right? That's not even like a super long time ago that we started playing all these games with metal covers, glass covers, leather covers, whatever. Like he saw a lot of those dollar signs on the board and realized there was ways to take them.
I mean, you could even argue that books like Legends of the Dark Knight, that number one with all the multiple colors, like that was a real defining moment in the idea of multiple covers will sell you multiple copies of the same book to the same consumer.
Yeah,
Like, which is, I mean, I won't say it's crucial. I would say that you could sell. I mean, I've been involved in several where we just sell one cover to per fan, but if you really want to make any sort of dollars at this business, you really kind of have to lean into that idea. And I think a lot of that, just to talk about my own pet theory here, well, we talked about blind bags. That's so much of it is you're gonna have to buy multiple copies to get the one you want,
yep, yep.
right? I think we're seeing that already with retailers saying, "Well, I opened 3 and they're all the same." Yeah, I know. You're going to have to open 10, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and that's it. I mean, it's the Pokemon Magic the Gathering side of things of like, look, there's an ultra rare version.
Yeah.
You got to chase it. Like there's a reason that happens. But
Yeah.
the variant covers, I've had a couple conversations with creators that don't love them, and they're like, well, why do you guys keep doing so many covers? Because people keep buying them, right? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the most generic of answers, but
Yeah.
it's absolutely true. That like there's, and the thing is it appeals on so many different levels, right? So when we're looking at a book and we're trying to figure out how we want to position it in the market, the way that you set up that cover strategy can help dictate how you're positioning that book in the marketplace. Like
And it
retailers pop,
communicates.
yeah, they
Yeah.
do. I mean, like if you throw a 1 in 5,000 cover on a book, you're telling retailers that some of you should buy 5,000 copies.
Yeah.
Now, you have to be smart about it. You can't throw a 1 in 5,000 on much of anything. You can't throw a 1 in 100, 250, 500 on a lot of things.
Oh.
But it's a way to communicate to the retailers how important that book is to you too, because you're spending money on the asset for the art that's going to go on the book. You're spending money on the creative team so that they're pumping it up. But yeah, I mean, you tell a retailer there's no incentives, there's no variance. You better hope that it goes back to stage one. Better hope that pitch is pretty amazing, because the beauty of the multiple cover thing is you can have 20 different iterations
Mm-hmm.
of an artist that you love, an artist that you don't love, an artist that you don't like different things, and you choose it. Some people want the full art cover, some people want the foil treatment, they want glow in the dark, whatever it is, right? But yeah, I mean, we saw it really firsthand this year at San Diego when we did some blind bags, and we had retailers asking if they could buy 50. And you're like, well, no. I mean, like we didn't even make that. Like this is kind of an experiment. I mean, I think we actually could have sold all of our blind bags in 24 hours if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Because there was that collectability gene kicks in, and you mix it with, convention gene, which is the other piece. You know what I mean? Like when somebody's at a show, I mean, they are looking to spend money. You know what I mean? Like you're trying to capitalize on it and make it make sense. But yeah, I mean, the cover game, it's 100% part of the DNA now. And I think it's hard to imagine a massive book without there being a lot of games played on the covers.
And it just, I mean, it also, as you said, it communicates to the retailer. The retailer now has to have a moment of saying, oh, do I want 25? Right? Just having them ask that question is enough, right?
Well, and you're giving them the opportunity to go, I have a customer who loves J. Scott Campbell, who loves Jay Lee, who loves Peach Momoko, who loves whoever it is. I know that, they will spend $50 on this book because they collect everything this person does. So I'm willing to take more chances on shelf copies because I want to get that 1 in 50, 1 in 25 for that particular customer. And as a publisher, that's marketing for us too, because that means you have a thicker stack on your new book list. It positions it better for us. Chances are you've gotten a handful of other incentives along the way because you reached up to get that. But it is 100% about, what can we give retailers that we think they can sell? Because we're not stupid. We know that nobody's very few retailers are throwing a 1 in 100 on the wall at $4.99, $3.99.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So we know that too. And it's kind of our way of giving it back to retailers of like, they're paying me the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
This is a way of me padding it and saying, hey, retailer, take a chance on this book. I'm going to give you a reward that you can sell for far more than cover price. It's going to help me from a marketing and visibility standpoint. Please do it. Right. And like, that's the symbiotic nature of all of this stuff. It's like, we know the game. Retailers want to play it too. There's a few that don't, and I get that. And I respect that. I think like the world exists for all flavors. And, every time a creator complains to me about exclusive covers or variants or incentives, I'm like, dude, that was 38% of your FOC. Or 50. You know what I mean? I mean, like you get somewhere, it's like, man, you don't understand. Like that's your pocketbook. Like that is your wallet directly impacted.
I will say that when I want to belabor this subject too long, but I do repeat a story that I think I've told here several times. But one of my first jobs in publishing was working with Philip Sablick. You mentioned him earlier. And I remember first week where he said, yeah, these variant covers seem to be a real thing right now. And I think it's a bubble. These things happen and everybody jumps on them and eventually it'll go away. And I think, what was that, 2010, 2011, something like that. That's when he told me that. And to this day, it's still a trend. And then, that was reminded me earlier today when we're talking about some shows we're putting together, and one of them we're talking about blind bags. And someone said, "Oh, this feels like a bubble," and I'm like, I don't know. Not it might be, but
It could
we're at
be.
least a year off from this bubble popping.
But here's the thing though, is like these bubbles don't ever fully pop either.
Yeah.
Like that's the other piece. Like when you think about retailer exclusive covers, they
Great
hit
point.
an absolute peak during the pandemic.
Sure.
I mean, there was a period at Boom where you could put an exclusive cover on anything.
Yeah.
And you'd get a retailer who would buy 250, 500, 1,000, whatever it was, right?
Uh-huh.
Did that bubble burst? It declined. It declined in 23 and 24 because the market changed, but we still do a ton of them.
Yeah.
It's not gone. You know what I mean? It's still a very valuable revenue stream for us and a very valuable like retailer relations tool of you want to do an exclusive, we'll help you out. It's fine. We'll totally help you out.
Yeah.
But it's never going to go away. And that's the thing. Blind bags will have their day. Something will happen with one of them that's going to be really leave a bad taste in people's mouths. It's inevitable with every bubble.
Yeah.
But they'll never be fully gone because there's still going to be, I mean, I remember going to a San Diego Comic-Con where Aspen was selling like mystery bags, right? I mean, like paper mystery bags. Like we all had that time at our local shop where here's a $10 mystery bag or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was 25 years ago, 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
It's never going to go away.
No, and it's going to be a piece. It's going to be a tool that people like you and me will use forever. At some point, you're going to have a project where you don't do it every project, but you have a project that has a particular asset or a particular problem you need to solve, and you go, you know what? I know how to fix this. Blind bags.
Yep.
It's going to be the thing. Once it's a tool in the toolbox, it doesn't go away, which is part of why we keep doing this. It just keeps working. Well, I feel like we're getting close to the end. I wanted to take just a little bit of time and kind of look towards the future. You've gone through distribution. You've gone through publishing. I guess you're going to be a retailer next. I think that's seems like the most obvious. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I came up in retail. It'd be full circle, right? I go back and do it. I think one of the things that's really I've been lucky in the last year and a half, maybe at Boom, of the 3+ years I've been there, is to be more involved on the creative side.
Yeah.
Right. To work with, we have a fabulous publisher, Michael Kelly, and Bryce Carlson, our deputy publisher. But like the three of us work really closely hand in hand, and it lets me kind of flex some of those creativity muscles, which, when you're doing pure sales or pure marketing or you're doing distribution, like you don't have as many levers to pull. And, we've really been lucky with having some projects come in where it's like, oh, here's a crazy idea, right? Here's something we can do with this book, and having a seat at that table and being able to be in those conversations, or to work directly with creators about here's how we envision this thing. What do you want to do? How do you want to play it and have fun and do some cool stuff? Like it's been great. I mean, we've had some bad experiments. We've had some good experiments, but the thing is you learned an equal amount of information from success and from failure, right? There's definitely like, oh man, that turned out really good, looked great, boy was that awesome, didn't sell at all. And then you've got the other thing where you're like, I wish we would have done X, I wish we would have done Y, sold like crazy. And but you learn and you file it and you kind of play it back. So I would love to get even more involved on the editorial side, even more involved in kind of like the focus of where we're headed and how we're going to get there and how we build our catalog, because that's something that we've got to work on. We really have to kind of start reinvesting and finding ways of growing into our boots again. Penguin Daddy is ready. He wants us to kind of produce some stuff and get some cool things going, and it gives us a lot of abilities that we didn't have when we weren't part of Penguin Daddy.
Okay, one more. I wanted to say how grateful I am for how mechanical you've been in this conversation. Many times I will try to poke people for actual data, and they get all real cagey, and I don't push them because that's not what I'm here for, right? But I appreciate how tactical this conversation has been. And so there's one other piece that I want to discuss, and then I want to start looking towards the future of our industry as a whole. You have now been either primarily focused on, or at least tangentially focused on, and I would imagine it's still probably a big part of your life, is sales through Amazon, right?
Sure.
And as we've said, book market sales, 60, 70% in some cases, that is what that is. And since book market sales are 40% of your thing, I could probably do this math off the top of my head if I was thinking. I mean, we're talking like
20, 25. Yeah.
Yeah, 20, 25% of your overall sales go through this one outlet. What are the levers that you are pulling now that you think are underutilized, or are like on your absolute, like if you get somebody brand new in your team and they're not doing this, they're like, why are you even doing this job? Like, these are the things you have to be doing if you are trying to sell through Amazon.
I think a lot of it comes down to your presentation on Amazon, right? And we were talking, I think it actually goes full circle back to the pitch thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have an area on an Amazon listing that's quote unquote above the fold,
Mm-hmm.
and then the below the fold. If you don't catch them on the above the fold, if you don't have an incredibly eye-catching cover that clearly communicates what the story is, you don't have a headline statement that's 20 words that tells you exactly why you should read this book. And then you if you could have 27 paragraphs after that, but the average consumer doesn't go beyond the fold. They're not clicking that read more section of an Amazon listing, unless they're buying a TV and they really want to get into features or crazy stuff like that. But we're talking about, straight, like, do you like this? Do you want to like this? How do I get you to like this? It's cover presentation. It's that open headline, log line, kind of pitchy first sentence. And then the other one, I mean, and this is the one that you can't really do yourself, but it's pull quotes, it's creator involvement. It's like those are the other things. Now, there's a million levers you can pull on Amazon. They've gotten less and less useful as Amazon has gotten bigger, right? Like I think that's the weird part that nobody really likes to talk about is 10 years ago you could run ads on Amazon and you could set it and forget it and make a ton of money running an ad because there just weren't a million competing things out there.
Right.
It's so hard now. I mean, I was talking to another publisher totally outside of our industry a couple of weeks ago of just, we used to be able to get 4x, 6x, 8x spend return on advertising spend through Amazon ads. I mean, I'm fighting to get 3 and 4% now, right? Like it's or 3 to 4x. You're constantly fighting now against a million things. And because Amazon sells everything,
Mm-hmm.
there are words that are impossible to advertise for. And that makes it incredibly difficult. So as an example, we have the book Butterfly, that's the show on Amazon Prime right now, or the Prime Video. You don't want to try to buy the word butterfly on Amazon
No.
because it's a bajillion kids products. It's 8 million scarves with butterflies on. It's like you have to be so tactical that you end up creating a niche of your advertising space because you're like, I need to define this. I'm not able to just go, anybody who search for good graphic novel, right? Like, okay, cool, but it's not going to happen so much. Like you have to be very, very precise. But on Amazon, I mean, it's all about that first section before you even scroll past that bit. Like it better be an incredible level of copy. PRH has an entire team that we leverage that work to optimize things for us of like, you have a description up here. Here's what we think you should change about it. Because, we're doing our description thinking about somebody picking up a book and reading it on the back of the book. And they've really helped, I think, in the past year of helping us refine how we position things online and how we want to position them going forward, because they're able to say, look, you need to say this. And it's weird because it does go totally back to the elevator pitch thing where you're like, well, duh, I don't know why I thought, but I think when you're talking about back cover copy, you're assuming the person has already physically picked up the book and they're holding it in their hand and they're at least considering it. So you don't have to do as much of that pitch. But online, I mean, I better tell you those first 20 words, 30 words, whatever it is, like exactly why you want to add that to cart and, buy it now. Don't add to cart, buy it now, right? Like that's the key.
That having had even the modicum of experience in that as I did, everything, I think I could dissect everything you just said and spend the next month trying to figure it out. That's a lot. Like yeah. Anyway, um, okay, let's move back to our friends at the direct market, and then we can kind of
Sure.
find a close to this. I have a question that I've been asking a lot of people, and I haven't really. It's been a few episodes since I've asked this, but I feel like you would have a very interesting perspective because you've had so much experience with so many other outlets. What would you say is the biggest risk facing the direct market right now today?
I mean, it's a big question. I think parts of it are generational.
Hmm.
I think we need to develop a new generation of retailers, and there are some that are coming up that are fantastic. Because the reality is we're losing a lot of the older generation of retailers who are choosing to retire, they're choosing to walk away from their business. We ultimately need young retailers that want to play the game, that want to find ways to do this, because there's a million ways to skin that direct market cat,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to develop it. We need folks that want to be entrepreneurs. It's, I think, for a while, a comic shop was the most opened and closed business in America,
Yeah.
which I thought was always a hilarious stat. But people think, I've got 700 long boxes in my garage. I should open a comic shop,
Right.
right? How are you going to sell them? How do you want to do that? And so we need, as publishers, I think, to help develop what can go on those shelves. But we need a new generation of retailers to want to come in and want to play the game, because I think one of the other things is the diversification of the product offering, right? Like I think the two kind of go hand in hand. Like
Truthfully.
you've got to have somebody who wants to grow their business, wants to be entrepreneurial, wants to take risks, and wants to find ways to succeed. They have to be hungry, but they also have to be open. Like they have to be open to trying a thing they've never tried before.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't know manga. I understand you don't know manga, or you don't know romance comics, or you don't, whatever the sphere is, but you got to have it on the shelf, because somebody's going to come in that store and they're going to look for it, and you might have an entire readership in your area that you've not developed because you just don't know that they exist, right? So I think the more we diversify the product offering, I love going into shops that also embrace community. I think that's the other thing that we need shops to do, is
100%.
like have a space, and I mean, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've seen a million different retailers over the years. The ones that I gravitate to and go back to are the ones that give me a space,
Yes.
right? Like it is a place where I can go in, I can have a relationship with somebody, I can talk to them about stuff. Maybe they have a coffee shop component, maybe they have a sandwich bar, whatever it is, right? Like
Yeah.
there's something that lets me spend time there. And it goes back in some ways to the way that Borders was successful initially, which was they wanted people to sit in the aisles and read books.
Yeah.
They purposefully put couches and chairs in those stores because they wanted you to want to go to that store, right? Like that is the thing. Nobody is going to Publix to hang out. Nobody is going to Kroger to hang out, right?
Yeah.
Like you look, if you are, more power to you, but you probably aren't. Um, but a comic shop, I mean, I've made lifelong friends from conversations I've had at comic shops.
Yeah.
I've made, lifelong
Yeah.
relationships with retailers because I've gone in and man, do they give me great feedback on stuff, or man, do they really do a good job of selling me on something. But ultimately, I can spend time there. I can spend hours at a comic shop, right? Because it's that mentality. It's the same, thing that I think we want to see developed a lot of places. Is we've lost a lot of areas to develop community. Like it
Truth.
goes back to when we were talking about remote work, right? So
Yeah.
you have a little bit less of that. So here's your outlet. And the thing is comics in general. I mean, I think the vast majority of comics folks, fans, consumers, retailers are incredibly open minded and incredibly broad in what they believe and what they think and how they want to present it. So it is ultimately you want it to be the safe space. And
Yeah.
I think comics is pre-designed to be that safe space because, at the core of, and you can go down the political ramifications table, but when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were creating characters, they were characters born out of oppression. When Superman was created in Cleveland, Ohio, that was very much an analog story for suffering of an immigrant, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you had all of these things. So comics is based on this community conversation, and there's a million flavors. Like that's the other piece of it. Like comics is beautiful in the sense that if you go to a bookstore and you want to read a book and you really like mysteries, you go to the mystery section and there's 7,000 of them. I can give you a comic on anything you want. You want a biography comic? We've got that. You want a horror comic? Sure. You want a crazy comic about, flying cats? I'm sure it's out there, right? Like there's, so you get everything out of comics, right? Like that's the thing that always keeps me in love with comics is it's constantly surprising to me, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing to see pitches come in from creators and you read them and you're like, holy, I I totally want to read that. I didn't know, you know what I mean? And like we had a book come in a couple of years ago, Man's Best from Pornsak Pichote, where it's about three service animals, and one of them is a French bulldog with a jetpack, and the other one is a golden retriever with a robotic arm, and the third one is a cat in a mech suit. And I'm like, I'm in. Like
All right.
right. You know what I mean? I'm totally instantly sold.
Yeah.
Because there's something for everybody. There's
Yeah.
flavors for everyone. And so that building a store with a community focus lets people know they have somewhere to go, right? Like I think we're slowly diminishing the number of safe places people can go in our country and giving somebody a place where we got characters that look like all of you. You know what I mean? There's a version of you in comics for everybody. And we need that. Like we need like that next generation, like as we're seeing it, I mean, there's so many good stores that are already doing it. Like that is my vision of like what a perfect comics future looks like is a store where it is ultimately a business,
Yep.
but the core pillar to that business is about creating a sense of community and creating a value in the community, right? Like you're a place and that's the magic bullet. Now how you get there and how you do it, like that's the hard question, right? I think it's a lot of thought effort from all parties of how do I get comic shops to try something they haven't tried before. Like, do we want to try something we haven't tried before as a publisher? Like, you know what I mean? Like all of these things, but that's the magic at the end. It's like comics,
Truly.
I think at one point we had it as a tagline, but like, comics are for everyone. And it's cheesy,
Oh yeah.
but it's not wrong.
It's not wrong. And I will say that, speaking just to add a little bit extra cheese, a little Parmesan grated on top of what you said there. It occurs to me that there's a really lovely metaphor in that, or lovely phrase in that. I go to the grocery store to do, right? I go to
Yep.
the ShopRite to do, but I go to the comic shop to be,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because it's part of who I am, and I'm there just to be there, right? It's a completely different mindset from walking in the door. This has been lovely. How can
Absolutely.
people find you, Josh? That if they want to hear more from you, are you a social media guy? Can people do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old, so my social media presence is less active than I'm sure a lot of others. But no, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I at least I at least engage in Instagram. How's that?
I'm the
Um,
same. I occasionally open it and go, look at all those notifications.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because like when I was choosing my screen name, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to do anything on this platform. I can almost guarantee it. So my screen name is so hard to follow because I'm not giving you anything. I'm not posting. I do about
Give me
4
something to
posts a
work with,
year. You know what I mean?
Josh.
Yeah. But no, I lurk on the FOC Facebook
Mm-hmm.
community. I lurk on a lot of fan communities online, and I do it because I think there's a lot of valuable information to be gleaned from those communities. It's not all super actionable,
Sure.
but there's nothing better than like trolling through 25 pages of, something is killing the children fans, talking about different things and walking away going, you know what we should do? Like, I've got this idea because I think there's enough people out there that would do it because these 300 people on Facebook really wanted it.
Yeah.
So that, I lurk. I lurk on Facebook.
All right.
I was on Twitter for a bit, but I think that kind of has imploded largely.
I get you. All right. Well, thank you, Josh. I
Yeah, of
appreciate
course.
that. I'm going to assume that everybody who is watching this knows where to get some Boom comics. If not, go to your local comic shop because, frankly,
Absolutely.
there's no other better place to be.
Don't just go there, hang out there.
Amen. Amen. All right, Josh. Well, this has been Comic Industry Insiders, a podcast that's you're probably either listening to or watching on YouTube. Either way, why aren't you subscribed? Why haven't you liked? Why haven't you pushed the alert button? We do a live show on Tuesdays. Have you heard about that? Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Josh. And we'll see you at High Tops eventually, I'm sure.